I highlighted this. I want to go deeper and show you how we get the full traceability of a build number all the way through Azure Pipelines to Octopus Deploy to the container, to the Azure Container App, to the image repository, and then finally to the application itself. So we're tying it all together, and then we'll be done. All right. So let's get into that. I think we talked about this already. Okay. So let's show you. We showed you how we have the, at the top, we have the build environment, build number. Okay, let's go through one by one and just piece out where that goes. So if I were to go to the build definition of this, which is our Azure Pipelines YAML, I'm not going to go through everything, but the name of this makes the build number. So we default 1.1. Whatever the revision is. The latest one was 43. Okay, 1.1.43. Then if we go to, let me just shrink all these. I'm not going to go deploy UAT, deploy TDD. Okay, so here's where we have, let me just pull up UAT. And what we're doing here is we are pushing in an environment variable with the build number so that it's there. Okay, we're installing the Octopus Deploy tools, and then we are telling the Octopus Deploy server to go into the AZ Container App project, the environment UAT, and deploy release number 1143. Okay, we're passing in that variable. Got it. Okay. And oh, by the way, the containerization of this, I didn't show you one of the pieces. It's not relevant, but the Docker file. Let me just open that in. This is it. All right. I didn't want to pass this up. Literally, oh, I think the one we have, that's literally the only difference. Okay. So all we're doing, the port number, we are pushing files into a /built. And so we're copying all the files, which is a Blazor application. We have to put that in /app. This just gives us some logs right here. We're running an ls command. And then we're calling .NET on UI.server, which is our startup assembly. Okay, that's it for the Docker file. But I just wanted to make sure I showed it to you. Okay, so inside Azure Pipelines, we have that. And we are containerizing. We're capturing the variables of the, this is where we get the connection string. So now we have the connection string, and we're going to inject the connection string into app settings. So JSON.connectionString.SQL, and we're setting the connection string. Then we're telling Docker to build and push to the onion repository using the Docker file with the environment name, which in this case UAT dash, and the build number. Okay, that's our traceability to create the image. Now we have the image, and so now we're telling Octopus Deploy to take that image and deploy it. Okay, so now we're over in Octopus Deploy, and we have to look at our variables. Boom. We have a lot of variables here, but we have our container image, which is TDD dash, and then octopus.release.number. Because we passed in the build number for the release, if we go to the overview, guess what? The release number is 1.1.43. So in our process, in our variables, now we have the tag for the container. And in our process, for our Octopus Deploy process, we do the database stuff, which we're not highlighting today. And then we deploy the container app arm, and it's going to run directly on a worker. So it's not a machine that we have to mess with. And we're using a connection to Azure and the source code. Right now, for long term, I like having the ARM templates in source because they just are templates. They don't vary for environment. But for this particular sample, it happens to be right here. We're tweaking stuff. So default value onion, I'm going to kind of cruise through a bunch of boilerplate stuff that just gets in the way because none of us are ARM experts. But you saw when I showed you, these were the two secrets that showed up. We have our ingress rules allowing target port of 80. We are going to allow 100% of the traffic to be going to a single container. And then we're not using Dapper. That's templated stuff. And then we are essentially, this is where we tell the Azure App Service to create itself using half CPU with 1 gig of memory and the initial scale from 1 to 3. Okay, so that's where this gets all the definition. But you think, okay, cancel it. All right, you think, where did the version actually get into it? So the version number, repositories, onion, the container image, the stuff inside the container image needs the version number. Well, that happens way back in the build script, way back when we compile .NET build, and check this out. Version equals version. You want that because let's just go to source UI server bin. Locals done it. Okay, let's just take one of these. Let's just take one of these and go to properties, details, and see how it's 1.1.1. That's our default local version. But on the server, that needs to be 1.1.43. Why? Because when we run our application, we want to be able to sniff the version number, 1.1.43. Well, what's this doing? Okay, let's go. We have a controller that's a helper called a version controller. All it does is get the current type, look at the current assembly, get the name, grab the version, spit it back out. That's our traceability. So when we look at a particular version, we have a /version URL that allows us to have complete traceability from the integration build all the way through the container image, the application, everything, Octopus Deploy 1.1.43, and we want every single thing to line up, okay? Every single thing. All right, let's close out. I know I'm a few minutes over. Everybody's sticking with me. With these different environments, you want to do more in your upstream environments than you want to be in downstream. You don't want to do anything in production for the first time. And so things like migrating the database, yeah, you're going to do that all the way through. But loading test data, recreating environments, running acceptance tests, all that stuff, you're going to do way more. That way, when you get to production, it's no big deal because everything's been practiced before. All right, let's close out with the quirks or the gotchas. These container images are immutable. And so if you're pushing your configuration into them, then you're going to need to label them with tags that have the environment name on them, because if any of the configuration changes, well, guess what? Now the image is going to have to change in some way. So if you want to externalize all your configuration, no big deal. Just change your C# code from getting things from the app settings to getting things from environment variables, for example, or some other variable store, and you're good to go. So the image tag is important. Also, you're going to want to build your code on Windows, like integration build on Windows, because most of us have Windows dependencies. And so if you have any dependencies, any Windows dependencies in your build chain, then you want to have your code run on Windows, whereas you're going to actually have the jobs or the part of the pipeline that builds the containers on Ubuntu latest, okay, on the Linux agents. And that does a really good job with the simple Docker file and containerizing a directory of files into a runnable container. And Azure Container Apps does have a lot of options, but you just got to pick one and stick with it, and then maintain traceability from your containers and environments back to your release candidate and your build.